Hello and welcome to this special hour of the early show, coming to you from the museum in Washington, D.C. Our focus this morning, the economy. A town hall with Republican leaders here to answer your questions, just as President Obama did in a similar event last month. I'm Erica Hill, along with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent and host of Face the Nation, Bob Schieffer.
Hi, everybody. Well, we're here to talk with key Republican leaders this time about the economy. According to a recent CBS News poll, 79% of Americans believe the economy is bad. More than half of us are concerned about ourselves or someone in our household losing their job.
And unemployment, of course, is back above 9%. Gas prices still around $4 a gallon in many areas. And across the country, there are signs of a double dip in the housing market. Major economic issues affecting millions of Americans. So today, we've invited a cross-section of folks to ask Republican leaders what they can do to alleviate some of that pain. Our folks have submitted their questions about the issues they find most important, and we'll also be hearing from viewers who sent their questions in online.
So basically, we know what the questions is, they don't. But joining us are four distinguished Republican officials, beginning with Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. He, of course, is chairman of the House Budget Committee and the author of the Republican Budget Plan.
Also with us, Florida Congressman Allen West and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who were both elected in the Republican way from the 2010 midterm elections.
And finally, Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn, who served with Congressman Ryan on the President's Deficit Commission. We want to say welcome to all four of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay. So let's get right to it. Our first question is from Trey Lewis, and this is for all four of you on the panel here. So, Trey?
Good morning, everyone. There are many ways that people feel as though President Obama isn't using to stimulate and make the economy more robust. If you were in a position to do so, what would be the one thing you would do to stimulate and grow the economy that President Obama isn't doing?
Start, Congressman.
One thing?
Just well, 30 to 45 seconds each, so you can each have time to answer.
First of all, I'd go in the opposite direction on spending, on taxes, on debt and deficits. Get rid of all the uncertainty of the economy. He's promising huge tax increases on successful small businesses. I wouldn't do that. Keep taxes low and get spending under control so we don't have a debt crisis. If we have a debt crisis, then we have a huge interest rate increase. We have an inflation problem. That's causing uncertainty of the economy. It's making it harder for businesses to create jobs. So I would go in a different direction than he has gone on fiscal policy, and that's exactly what we've done in the House, is offered a different direction on fiscal policy. Keep taxes and spending low, not high.
I think the exact same thing what Paul was talking about is creating the economic and fiscal policies that create confidence in the American consumer and also our small business owners. What I see down in my district is the small businesses are the economic engine that drive this country. But yet, when you look at some of the regulations that are coming in, and it's restricting the access to capital for them to grow, and you look at some of the tax policies, which are going to preclude them from hiring more Americans. When you drive by in South Florida on U.S. Federal Highway 1, you see all those closed storefronts. You just have to think about maybe there were 6 to 8 Americans that once occupied those storefronts.
Governor?
You know, what I would like to see a president do is really lead and ask for a balanced budget, which he is yet to do. I think that's incredibly important. But from a governor's perspective, everything I've tried to do to govern in South Carolina has been stopped by President Obama. Whether it's how we're going to deal with the health care crisis, he's mandating more on our states and we can't afford it. Whether it's creating jobs, he's actually got the National Labor Relations Board suing a great American company for creating jobs in South Carolina. Or when it comes to illegal immigration, he's stopping my labor director from allowing her to enforce the laws that are in place. So, you know, the key is let the states have the flexibility and the freedom they need to have. In order for us to govern, which at the end of the day is really down to the states, the federal government needs to get out of the way. We need a president that really understands. Let the states understand what the 10th Amendment's all about. Let them have states' rights and let them handle their states in the way they need to.
Senator?
I think what needs to happen is we need to identify the real problem. And the real problem is America's anxious. It doesn't have confidence about where we're going. And that's, I think, a leadership deficit on behalf of my friend, President Obama. I think we need to talk true and honestly to the American public about the depth of our problems. They're not unsolvable, but they're unsolvable until we address them and identify them. And what Washington's big habit is we treat the symptoms of the problem rather than the problem. And so being honest and saying we don't have any choice, we have to eliminate $9.7 trillion out of the federal government's expenditures over the next 10 years to not go in the tank. Now, they can dispute that, but that's the fact. And if anything short of that will not solve the problem for your future or your children's future. There's $2.5 trillion sitting on the sideline in this country right now that could be invested if people had confidence and clarity about the future. And I don't believe President Obama has delivered that. And I think as soon as he does, you're going to see a big turnaround in the economy, regardless of what we do on the other things. Is we got to have confidence that we believe in our future. And I think that future is lacking because we haven't had the leadership to put that forward.
Well, that certainly gives you the Republican view of what's wrong with the economy right now. So that gives us a place to start here. Eric?
A nice overview. We want to move on to our next question now. Nancy Logan is an executive assistant who's currently between jobs. And chances are Nancy may look familiar if you were with us at last month's town hall. She was here. She asked the president pretty much the same question. So your chance now to ask it of Republican leaders.
Thank you, Erica. Hello. I was given a 3-year adjustable rate loan modification that ends in less than a year, and the rate is likely to go up significantly, where I won't be able to afford my monthly mortgage payment. I can't refinance my house or move into a fixed rate mortgage because I owe more than the house is worth. My question is, what is your party in Congress doing to help Americans like myself who are stuck in this home mortgage process dilemma?
And we want to toss this one to Congressman West because I know in Florida, I believe it's 46% of homes are underwater.
Yeah, it's an incredible situation down in Florida where, of course, the subprime mortgage industry really took a toll. And I think the most important thing that we have to do is, from the policies we're creating up here, is set the conditions by which we can reduce the size and the scope of this federal government to get money back into your pockets so that you can stay into your home, so that you can have this job growth. I think that one of the problems that we have seen, if you go back and you look at the Community Reinvestment Redevelopment Act, you know, when government all of a sudden got involved into the mortgage industry, I mean, sooner or later, 30 years down the road, you see what happens. When all of a sudden we start to take those mortgage-backed securities and we're selling them freely between banks and also the foreign banks, then we have all this bad paper out there. So I think the most important thing is get back to sound economic principles that work and not come up with the Band-Aid remedies like this $8,000 mortgage credit that we give, which we saw really did not do anything to stimulate the mortgage industry.
Congressman,
well, I would just say, like Tom Coburn said, why is this happening? It's happening because the economy's in the tank. There's no confidence. People don't feel confident about the future, so they're not going out and taking a risk and buying a home, and therefore bringing your home value up. So this is a symptom of a bad economy. So let's fix the economy. And there's a lot of things I hope we get into about what is necessary to get this economy growing, because Washington's thrown a bunch of programs at you, and it's still not working. It's cost a lot of taxpayer liability. There's no substitute for economic growth and confidence in this economy to bring that market back up so you're not underwater anymore.
All right, let's go to Robert Johnson, who has, I think, a fairly interesting question here. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. There's a lot of agreement that we need to balance the budget and reduce the deficit. How realistic are we in achieving those goals if we do not reinstate or raise at least some taxes?
I want to ask Senator Coburn to ask that question because Senator Coburn voted against the continuation of the Bush tax cuts last December, kind of got off the Republican reservation there. He wanted them offset. So should taxes be off the table, Senator Coburn?
No, I don't think so. Look, there's two answers to your question. One is a policy question, and the other is a political. How do we, with the divided government we have today, fix our problems without agreeing that we're going to have to give something to get what we want? And growing the economy to markedly enhance the revenues shouldn't be an anathema to Republicans. So if, in fact, we need to do all these spending reductions, and I'd love for us to have time to really talk about, because I can give you 8 out of the 9 trillion I'm going to propose. But if we're going to do it, you're going to, for those that are locked in politically to those programs, you're going to have to give them something. So we're at historically low values as far as the percentage of the GDP that comes from revenue from American taxpayers. That's part of our problem. We're also at a historical high in terms of spending. That's the bigger part of our problem. What we have to do is pull those both together if we're going to get back to it. 18.8% is about the max you're ever going to collect unless you have a boom like the dot-com bubble. But we need to solve that political problem and be realistic to know that for us to get a solution to the problem, both sides are going to have to give something. Now, what's the policy question? The policy question is how do you drive the economy with the government taking a larger and larger share out of the economy? And the answer to that is eliminate things that are not legitimate roles for the federal government. Going back to the question on homes. Where do you find in the Constitution the authority for the federal government to be in the home loan business? I mean, it's not there. And the reason we're at risk today, the reason our children are at risk, is because we've abandoned constitutional principles, we've abandoned the enumerated powers, and we've decided to do things that our founders knew in our best interest would never work in terms of a republic.
All right, we're going to take a break here.
We are. We're going to take a quick break, but there will be more. Don't worry. Our Town Hall on the Economy continues with more questions from our studio audience and also from you at home. Stay with us. You're watching The Early Show on CBS. We are back now with our panel of Republican leaders, Senator Tom Coburn, Governor Nikki Haley, Congressman Alan West, and Congressman Paul Ryan.
And we want to bring in our CBS News business and economics correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, who is following the questions we have been getting online. Rebecca?
Bob, thank you. And this first question comes from Facebook. It was submitted to us from Suzanne Thornton of Cushing, Texas. And she asks, under a Democratic President Clinton, we had a surplus. Under a Republican President Bush, it disappeared and turned into a deficit. So why should we hand our country back over to Republicans? Governor Haley, why don't you take this one?
You know, I think what we first have to understand is both parties made a mistake. I mean, both parties did not handle the government responsibly the way they should. We have got to, and in reference to what the senator said, we do have to cut taxes. In South Carolina, we have an economy where I have basically said government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never intended to be all things to all people. So what we did was we said, this is going to hurt, but we're going to get back to the basics and we're going to get strong again. And we're going to do it independently of the federal government. And a lot of that is we are cutting unemployment taxes for employers. We are cutting down the weeks for employees on what they get in terms of unemployment taxes. But we are incentivizing those that are successful to want to be more successful. And we have to remember that when you give businesses cash flow, when you give them profit margins, what's the first thing they do? They hire people. So your goal has to be on jobs. It has to be on job creation. And it has to be on the fact that when you know both parties have messed up, guess what that brought about? The rise of the Tea Parties, which were upset with both parties, that said, we want to take our government back, we're going to do it. Now it's government's responsibility to control the spending and know the value of
Governor,
the dollar.
can I just ask you this question? Corporations are turning in record profits right now, but they don't seem to be hiring. So doesn't that beg a question here? Why aren't they hiring with all these big profits?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, I'm proud to say that while the economy is taking a downward turn nationally, in South Carolina it's going up. And the reason it's going up is because unemployment's down for the fourth time in a row. They have a governor that's fighting for jobs every day. We just passed tort reform. We just passed Medicaid reform. We just passed that every legislator had to start voting on the record. I mean, we're doing things that are giving companies confidence. Confidence, one, to come to South Carolina. We are fighting the unions every step of the way. We are a strong right to work state. We're going to stay that way. That's what gives a company confidence to come and say, this is a state where we can make money. This is a state where we can invest and know that we're right to hire, and then they stay in, and then they come to stay. And my job as governor is to continue to keep communication with those companies and say, how do we help you expand?
Representative Ryan, a lot of Governor Haley's response talks about jobs, and jobs are top of mind for Americans. The most recent CBS News poll showed that 48% of Americans think the most important thing is jobs in the economy, but just 10% think it's the deficit. That's what we mostly hear from Republicans. We hear more about the deficit than we hear about jobs.
Well, I wouldn't suggest that. They're interrelated. These are the same issues, so they're not exclusive of one another. Jobs comes from economic growth. Economic growth gives us more revenues, which helps us get down the deficit. The huge deficit we have is nothing more than tomorrow's interest rate increases or tax rate increases. So when government runs huge deficits like it is today, what that tells businesses who are sitting on capital and not hiring, look out, my taxes are going to go up tomorrow, or we're going to have an inflation interest rate problem tomorrow. And so it is these massive deficits that are showing businesses that there's an uncertain future with which they don't want to invest in. And that is why a lot of businesses are sitting on capital. I did a roundtable in Kenosha with business leaders last Thursday. Did one 2 hours ago with business leaders. All of them are telling me the same thing. We don't know what's coming from government next. So many new regulations coming down the pike.
They
all
also
these
don't know
new
what's
taxes.
coming from the consumer,
And so
though.
it
There's
is
no
hurting
consumer
job
demand
creation.
for a lot of their products.
Say that again?
They don't know what's coming from the consumer. The demand that's coming from American consumers is very weak at this point, which is why they're not creating the jobs to sell the product or to manufacture it.
Consumption comes when people feel secure in their own lives, when people have jobs that they feel secure in, when they're not worried about losing their job. You need to have a good economy that is producing jobs and giving security, economic security to Americans who then will go forward and act like consumers. And so what we have right now is a government that is giving so much uncertainty. Tax rates on successful small businesses under the president's plan, which is in law, is going as high as 44.8% on successful small businesses. Most of our jobs don't come from the big corporations, they come from these successful small businesses. And when we're going to be raising their taxes as much as President Obama is proposing, that puts a chilling effect on job creation. When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China. This is not a future in which people, businesses, or consumers feel confident in the American economy. We've got to deal with these issues so we can feel confident and get this job creation back on.
There's obviously a vicious cycle here, and it doesn't help
right.
that the U.S. economy is absolutely a consumer-driven economy. You talk about the importance of confidence. You talk a lot about small businesses. But going back to large businesses who are sitting on this cash,
That's right.
isn't one of the major issues also that they have learned how to do more with less, and it is not in their interest to hire people? Is there any way you can change that?
Well, first of all, predictability. I think large businesses, first of all, we're in the international economy whether we like it or not. And we have to recognize if we tax our employers, our producers a lot more than our foreign competitors tax theirs, they win, we lose. Right now we have the highest corporate tax rate, now that Japan is lowering theirs, than any other industrialized country. Right now we are taxing our businesses, our manufacturers in America, a lot more than our foreign competitors tax theirs. And what is the government telling them? You're going to pay higher taxes. What is the government doing? Running up record deficits. That means even higher taxes. So even though the president's proposing over $2 trillion in new tax increases on these businesses, we still aren't solving our fiscal problem, and it's putting a chilling effect on hiring. So you're not going to get good consumption in this country if you don't have good investment, if you don't have confidence, if you don't have businesses out there not only keeping people on the payroll, but adding to their payrolls. And so we're in a vicious cycle, and we want to get on a virtuous cycle.
All right, we're going to have to stop this cycle right now because we need to take a quick break. When we come back, though, we do have several more questions to get to, so stay with us here at The Early Show. Welcome back to this special hour of The Early Show, a town hall on the economy, the Republican view.
Joining us, Senator Tom Coburn, Governor Nikki Haley, Congressman Allen West, and Congressman Paul Ryan. And next, we have a little question about taxes. Senator Coburn, I'm going to ask this one be directed to you, and it comes from Crystal Grant.
Greetings. I'm originally from Boiling Springs, South Carolina, so greetings to you, Governor Haley. My question is about compromise. With low and middle class Americans making sacrifices every day and the deficit growing exponentially, it seems difficult to justify tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. Are you open to considering maybe tax returning to previous levels for those making over $500,000 a year versus the $250,000 level?
I think my approach would be we've got to find a compromise. I don't like that because when you do that, what you're doing is taking investment capital that's not going to go into a small business or a medium-sized business. You're taking capital away and say the government can spend the money better. The fact is if we were to lower tax rates, we could actually generate increased revenue. And that's what we had proposed in terms of the President's Deficit Commission. That's what the Gang of Six was working on. You know, we can increase taxes $1 trillion by lowering tax rates and getting rid of things like the ethanol blenders credit that you all pay $6 billion a year for and then go to the pump and pay another $1.72 a gallon in subsidies for ethanol blended gasoline. I mean, we have $1 trillion worth of tax earmarks in the tax code that are special favors across, and some are not, but the vast majority are special favors. We ought to eliminate those, lower the tax rate so people can have the confidence and the expectation that they know what they're going to pay. So I'm not against increasing the revenues of the federal government, but we ought to do it in a way that actually increases jobs and increases wealth and increases prosperity. But combined with that, you have to decrease the size of the federal government. The size of the federal government is double what it was 10 years ago. We just simply can't afford it. I mean, you just said in your statement, you have to live within your means. And the federal government has refused to do that. And we're incompetent in Congress to address the issues. A couple examples, if I can take some time. We have 80 economic development programs. We have 188 total. We have 80 within 4 agencies. Not one of those economic development programs has ever had a measurement on it to see if it was actually effective in developing the economy. Not one time have we ever looked at it. And the cost for that money, that $6.6 billion that goes for the, we don't know what it is. Wouldn't we be better off having that $6.6 billion in the states like Governor Haley and say, here, do economic development with the money the way you think you ought to do it, rather than us in Washington where we don't actually know how to do it.
What would be your take on that, Mr. West?
Well, I think it's very simple. And understand, 4 years ago, I was sitting in a desert in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So I bring a very common sense perspective. And being in the military is simple. You know, we don't reinforce with additional resources where we're going to lose those resources. And so I think until we up here in the federal government can show that we can be fiscally responsible with the resources of the American taxpayers, then we should not be asking to get increased resources. See, one of the problems is when you have tax cuts, but then you grow government, that's how you take a surplus, you turn it into a deficit. But it's not just the tax rates. It's all of the additional taxes that make up a marginal tax rate. So the next thing you know, you got the dividends tax, you got your capital gains tax, you got your estate tax, you got all the other taxes you may have at the state level, even down at the local level. And now what we're talking about is a marginal tax rate for people that can be anywhere from 60 up to 70%. And even when John F. Kennedy took over as president and he saw a marginal tax rate on those top income tax brackets of 91%, he said that's too high. And he cut it down to 71%. So when you're talking about growing the economy, once again, investment, ingenuity, and innovation does not come from Capitol Hill, does not come from Washington, D.C. It comes from the people down here. And we have to set those fiscal and economic policies that promote that. And we have to get spending in line with revenues, 18 to 20%. That's where it is. We need to cap that federal government spending at about 20%. Right now, federal government spending as per GDP is 25%. And with the Obama budget, it's programmed to go above 30%. And you cannot continue to go on that path if you want to have long-term sustainable economic and job growth.
Let me ask you, the 3 members of Congress here. You've been here since January. To the best of my knowledge, you've done absolutely nothing. There's no jobs program. You got unemployment at 9.1%. Why is that?
Well, we have divided government now. First of all, what happened in the last 2 years?
Well, there's always been divided
there was
government.
there was a jobs program. It was $1 trillion when you had the borrowing costs on stimulus. Remember what stimulus was supposed to do? It's supposed to keep employment from going above 8%. We're at 9.1. We went as high as 9.8%. What else happened? A tax increase, $800 billion in tax increases with the president's health care law. The health care law passed, which is basically the government taking over 17% of our economy. We've got new energy regulations coming through, putting a chilling effect on American-made energy to lower our gas prices. And so much has come from the government in the last 2 years. I believe that is the greatest reason why the economy is not growing. What have we done since January? In the House of Representatives, where the 2 of us work, we've passed a budget to reform this tax system, make people take away tax shelters from higher income individuals in exchange for lower tax rates for businesses to create jobs.
Congressman, not to be argumentative, but you passed something that you knew there wasn't one chance that the Senate was going to pass.
Well, it would be nice if the Senate tried to pass a budget. It's been 775 days since the Senate even bothered trying to pass a budget.
Wouldn't it be good to try to find some way to compromise on these
That's
things?
why we
kind of get the
decided-
people at the same table and say, here's something we want to do, here's something you want to do, instead of passing these things that people know will never get agreed to by the other
I'll give
House.
you another great example. Our office came up with H.R. 1663, which is the Small Business Encouragement Act. And what it says is in the previous fiscal year, if you're a small business that has revenues of $20 million or less, you have 100 employees or less, we're talking about extending the Work Opportunity Tax Credit for 2012 and 2013, which says we'll give you $6,000 if you hire a person off the unemployment rolls. And if you're in a county that has a double-digit unemployment rate, you get an additional $6,000. Now, those are the type of things we're looking to do to help small businesses to get out there, encourage them, and incentivize them to hire people. It's sitting in the Ways and Means Committee, and hopefully they'll get it passed, and we'll get it on the House floor, and then we'll get over to the Senate. And hopefully that they'll pass that and they'll get on the President's table before we recess.
Well, Bob, I think what you're describing is a system of the careerism that has invaded and perhaps been here a long time. The goal is the next election, not the next generation right now in Washington.
Absolutely.
We're more interested in political careers than we are fixing the very real and urgent problems in front of our country. The Senate has, this is the lowest level of votes the Senate has had in my 7 years, and the lowest level of votes in 25 years. And the reason we're not voting is people don't want to take a vote because they might have to defend it. So rather than come up here and do the job and have the courage and the honor to go out and defend your votes, what we do is we just don't vote.
How do you change that, though? How do you change that,
You
Senator?
change
And
it
the
with
approval
leadership.
rating for
You
Congress
change
is now
it with leadership.
Change it with your own
18%.
actions.
But leadership
we
continues
put ideas on the
to
table.
change.
We've passed ideas in the House. We've said, here's how we think we balance the budget. Here's how we save Medicare. Here's how we create jobs. We're putting these bills out there. We're passing these bills because we think you need to do is lead with your ideas, defend your ideas, and what we're having is basically the crickets are chirping. We're not seeing any action from any of our legislative partners on the other side of the aisle.
Governor Haley, it looks like she'd like to comment here.
I have to say this because while
outside
while
Washington.
DC is totally in chaos and has is just not doing anything. The states can't wait. We have to lead. And so what I would beg of both the Congress and the Senate, which I think everybody should agree on, is give us flexibility. Quit mandating any spending down. Medicaid alone is a quarter of South Carolina's budget. Give us the ability to decide what the health care needs are of our citizens. When it comes to any education mandates, let us decide how to educate our kids. When it comes to any of the health care, let us decide our health care. And block granting and Medicaid is huge for us. If they would just do that, and I know that the Congressman has done that as well, and they've been helpful, these are things that can really make a difference. So, you know, I have said DC is just dysfunctional right now, but all I would beg is that those things can be done right away. Those are things that y'all could pass that would make a huge difference with our states, that we could continue to function and lead for our people while y'all figured everything else out.
Let me just ask Senator Coburn to wrap this up, because I think he hit the nail on the head here. Is there any way to change this, Senator? Will we see a change in our lifetime?
I think the American people need to change it, though. I'm convinced that Washington its main focus is short-term political expediency. And the reason our country's at risk is because we think short-term and about the next election rather than thinking about the future of our country. You know, the reason I'll stand up as a conservative Republican, one of the biggest deficit hawks in Congress, and say, I'll negotiate on taxes, because our country's in trouble. And if we don't, we're going to lose the very limited future that's in front of us today. And somebody else is going to tell us where we're going to spend our money.
That's right.
It isn't going to be the American people. It's going to be the bondholders throughout the world.
So, Senator Coburn, do we go the direction then of the United Kingdom and employ austerity measures and face potentially a toxic environment? That's what the Bank of England just said, a toxic environment where there's slow growth and inflation taking place at the same time?
No, you do both. You do both. There's no question. First of all, every dollar the federal government spends doesn't give the same bang for the buck in the economy. And I can show you about $5 trillion that gives us a negative return on the dollars that we spend. So if we're going to spend money as a federal government, then we ought to be spending it where we get an economic multiplier of $2 or $3. The problem with the stimulus bill, there was only $46 billion out of almost $900 billion that actually had any productive change in terms of economic multiplier in the whole stimulus bill. No wonder it failed. We said it was going to fail because it did not create jobs that then created more jobs. So this isn't hard. What is hard is to come to the realization that career politicians in this country are killing this country.
With that, we actually have to move on to the next topic, although we could talk about this for a long time. And this comes from Leslie, who's in our audience. Leslie has a question about Medicare.
Hi there. I'm 48 years old, so I'm in the age group that would be impacted to the changes to the Medicare program under the so-called Ryan plan. I'm also the caretaker of an elderly parent. It's common in my age group. How can I be certain that Medicare will be affordable for me when it comes time for me to retire, especially considering I've been paying in for 30 years?
Right. I'm the Ryan guy. So I guess I'll answer the question. A few facts that are not in dispute. Fact number one, we have 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day and fewer workers coming in to pay taxes to pay for the program. Fact number two, healthcare costs, they're skyrocketing at about 4 times the rate of inflation, which is threatening Medicare's current ability to provide affordable, accessible care. Fact number three, all the independent experts agree, Medicare's going bankrupt. Medicare, along with Social Security, I would argue, are the most important federal programs we have. And so what we want to do is save and strengthen the program. Here's what we say. Number one, if you have retired already, or if you're 55 and above and you're about to retire, government made a promise to you. We should keep that promise. So we say, don't change the program for anybody above the age of 55. But in order to be able to do that, in order to cash flow that promise, prevent that bankruptcy from hitting my mom who's on Medicare. You know, my mom and I took care of my grandmother when she was Alzheimer's on Medicare. This is very important to me personally as well. You've got to fix it for the next generation if you want to keep it for the current generation. And the way in which we propose to fix it for 54 and below are to have a system that works like the one we have in Congress, like the one that President Clinton's Bipartisan Commission to Save Medicare proposed in the late 1990s. It's an idea that's had bipartisan support in the past. It's called premium support. It works just like Medicare Advantage today, Medicare prescription drugs, Medicare supplemental. You get a list of plans that Medicare pre-approves that are guaranteed coverage options that you select from. These plans compete against each other for your business, and then Medicare subsidizes that plan based on who you are. If you're a wealthy person, we don't think taxpayers should subsidize their health care as much as everybody else. If you're a lower income person, or if you're a person who keeps getting sicker, we think we should have increased subsidies. And so what we say is, starting for the 54 and below crowd when they turn 65, is take what we spend per person on Medicare, apply it to these people, adjust it, like I said, less for the wealthy, more for the poor and the sick, so that they can have plans to choose from and use choice and competition. Here's the alternative. The president passed a law. It's in law. Obamacare. I know people don't like being called Obamacare. The current health care law raids $500 billion from Medicare to spend on this new health care law. And then it puts a board of 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in charge of cutting Medicare for current seniors through price controls, which will lead to providers dropping care, which will lead to rationing, which will hurt the actual program for current seniors. We repeal the rationing board. We repeal the raid of Medicare. We think Medicare funds should go to Medicare, not other programs. How many times have you heard this on Social Security? And then we save it for the next generation so that we can cash flow the promise and keep it for the current generation. So when you turn 65, you'll have a program that will be there for you at the age you are, 48. I'm not that much younger than you. It's not going to be there for us if we don't do anything to save it. It is going bankrupt. The sooner we act on this, the better off we are, and the more gradual the necessary reforms are. It will be British austerity. It will be painful benefit cuts to current seniors, tax increases on everybody like young people that slows down our economy if we keep kicking the can down the road. And it is the political careerism around here that has put us in the mess we are in, and you need leaders to step up and stop doing this. We put a plan out there. I don't expect everybody to like the plan, but at least we put a plan out there, and I would love to see our partners on the other side of the aisle put their alternative plans on there so we can get to the business of actually solving this problem.
We need to kick this can over to Rebecca for the next question.
All right, get going.
Rebecca?
Well, we have a question from Brian Olfey from Post Falls, Idaho. He sent it via email. He says, considering the fact that the U.S. government is the nation's largest employer, how do you expect to cut $2 trillion from the budget without sending the jobless rate through the roof? And Representative West, why don't you take it?
I think it's important for us to, as we said, we got to get back to understanding what are the essential functions of the federal government. One of the questions I asked when I got up here, because I'm a newbie, I've been here since the 5th of January, never held any type of public office before. But it's, once again, it's a common sense approach. It's a very disciplined approach that the military teaches you. 13 appropriations bills come out of the House of Representatives. What's the priority? And no one could answer that. And that's why I wrote a letter over to the House Appropriations Chairman, Hal Rogers. Why don't we have a tiered program so that we say these are the priorities, and then we can understand from the bottom up. We can start to refine, we can start to cut, and get the federal government back into its essential functions. So I think that, you know, we can have this bureaucratic nanny state that grows up here in Washington, D.C. And if you continue to have that, you're going to continue to have the separation between the revenues that are coming in and the spending that is going out. And so what we've seen in the past 3 years, $1.42 trillion, $1.29 trillion, and now $1.65 trillion of deficits. So we have to make the hard decisions up here. And I think that's one of the reasons why persons like the governor and myself, we're not career politicians. And we're bringing in a perspective that is totally different and outside of the Beltway.
Coming back to the
we've
question,
got to make a change.
Coming back to the question, though, of jobs, we are facing a new reality. We are facing a reality.
Government does not create jobs.
Right.
The private sector creates jobs.
And we are looking at a private sector right now that's not doing it.
You're not
They're
setting
shipping
the
them
conditions
overseas.
for the private sector to grow. You're not setting the conditions. You
Well,
just
let me
heard
tell you what
a
the
corporate
conditions
business
are.
tax rate of 35%, the highest in the world. Who is going to be able to create a job here in the United States of America, bring production and manufacturing back to this country if you're pushing them away?
Well, Ford Motor Company, for example,
Ford Motor
is
Company
creating
did not
jobs.
take any bailout money, and they created jobs.
Exactly.
Great
They
thing.
are. They're creating 7,000 jobs here over the next 2 years. But they're also building a third of their cars and producing a third of their cars for the Asian market by 2020. That means the market is changing. The world is changing. People overseas are the primary customers of U.S. businesses.
Absolutely. And that's
If
why
they are building cars for foreign counterparts, why aren't they building them in foreign countries? That's exactly what they are doing. How do you work against fate?
Well, I don't think we're working against fate. I think the thing is, once I look at the Panama Canal, the Panama Canal is going to be expanding in 2014 to bring in larger cargo ships. We happen to have a little thing in my district called Port Everglades, brought in $98 billion of revenue last year. I've already had meetings with the senior representative from Hong Kong and also Consulate General from Taiwan, who want to have increased trade and increased revenue coming out of South Florida with small business owners. Those are the type of things that we're looking to do. How can we increase our production, our manufacturing, our export to some of these foreign markets? But right now, we don't have the right type of economic and fiscal policies. It comes back to the one word that we keep saying over and over again: certainty.
Well, I think we've missed talking about the fact that the National Labor Relations Board, when you've got a president that allows the National Labor Relations Board to actually sue an American company for creating jobs, you are actually incentivizing companies to do business overseas. That was huge, and that is right at the heart of what we're saying. If we have to create jobs, government can't be the one stopping them. I mean, President Obama can't say on one side, I am for job creation, and on the other side, sue one of the companies that is trying to create thousands of jobs. They created 1,000 jobs in South Carolina, all while expanding 2,000 more jobs in Washington, and they still sued them. That sends a terrible message to our companies, and a terrible message. When I was at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we had a Canadian company that said, I'm not doing anything until I see what happens with this lawsuit.
We're going to have to leave it there. Stay with us, though. We'll be back again in just a moment. We are back with time for one quick final question, a yes or no if you can. Do you believe the debt ceiling will be raised?
I do believe so if for every dollar of borrowing, we cut more than $1's worth of spending.
Not without spending control measures.
Only with deep spending cuts and spending caps going forward.
I agree with the governor.
Okay. There's not a yes or no in any of those answers.
Yes, but.
But they were all short, and we appreciate that. We appreciate all your time today.
Thanks to all of you.
You're
welcome.
Very, very interesting. We all learned a lot. Thank you.
Our panel again, Congressman Paul Ryan, Congressman Allen West, Governor Nikki Haley, and Senator Tom Coburn.
And thanks to our studio audience out there and our host, the night studio at the museum here in Washington.
If you missed any bit of it, or maybe you'd just like to see it all again, you can view the entire town hall at youtube.com/CBS or on our website at earlyshow.cbsnews.com. And also be sure to log on to cbsnews.com for a special Washington Unplugged with reaction from our town hall. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for being with us. Your local news is next.